Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Everything that was happening around Miranda was like a fairy tale, and the girl even tried to breathe quietly, so as not to scare away this magical extravaganza. It was Adriana who spoiled everything. Apparently, she was tired of watching tuned beauties in stunning outfits, and she decided to distract herself a little on the homeless. Her friend held out a bag of popcorn, but Miranda hissed at her. "Can't you stand going without food for even a couple hours?" "I can't imagine. My body is very sensitive. I can't go hungry at all." "Adriana, please stop talking. Your chatter spoils the experience." Adriana noisily popped another bag of popcorn into her mouth. "By the way, I'm the one who got the tickets to this show. You'd have to carry me around for a week for that." Miranda couldn't contain her smile. "Adriana, I'd love to, but your weight is beyond me. Can I just kiss you on your snub nose?" The girl at the window was a popcorn lover, and she rolled her eyes. "Come on, you can do it without the tenderness. A simple human thank you will do." Miranda said in a rapid-fire voice. "Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Adriana. But please pause for about 5 minutes. I want to savor this incredible spectacle. I don't know when I'll ever be lucky enough to be at an event like this again. Don't worry about it, as long as I'm around to get you a ticket for the next show." "Adriana, but I asked you to Miranda, please." I also looked at the carcass from the funny face. "I'm not talking, but only for 5 minutes. I'm already dizzy from all this flashing and music." Indeed, all the action accompanied rhythmically music models with the same faces and beautifully moved on the podium and Miranda. I really wanted to be in their place. The huge hall was full of spectators, but most of the audience was the social elite of the city. For this category of guests, there were several rows of soft chairs, and ordinary basins like Miranda and Adriana were crowded from outside this sector. But thanks to the complex and popcorn-loving girls, managed to make their way to the very podium. Many girls from their class dreamed of becoming models, and some even prepared for casting in advance. Miranda also dreamed of such a future, but she was a realist and realized that with her small stature, it was impossible. So she only had to admire other girls who managed to succeed. Adriana's mother also got tickets to the show of the spring collection of a famous Moscow fashion designer. She worked as a cleaner in a shopping center, which recently opened in their city. The friends stirred again. "Miranda, your 5 minutes are up. Let's get out of here. I'm starting to feel sick." Adriana poked her friend painfully in the side, and Miranda became very angry with her. "You need to cut down on the junk you eat. Then you won't get nauseous." The pebble flew past Adriana, who started to move towards the exit. Miranda had to involuntarily follow her, and at the same time listens to unflattering remarks in her address. The village is not a father. First, you need to learn how to behave and then go to such events. Particularly ardent fans of fashion threw a more rude expression in the direction of the girls. Miranda was very ashamed of herself and her friend. And she was like a parrot repeating sorry, please, when the girls got outside, she asked. "Adriana, these people are 100 times right. Why did you drag me here if you weren't going to stay until the final part of the show?" The fat girl even jumped in surprise. "Oh, come on, girl. I'm all for your sake, you could say. I'm trying to get you closer to your dream. After all, I know that you are raving about this, as it is called fashion industry." "Oh my God. I remembered that wild word." Adriana took a breath after such a long speech. "You didn't take offense at me." Adriana looked at Miranda with the look of a guilty child, and the girl laughed. "There's no use resenting you, because you're going to do things your way anyway. But to be honest, I think we'll stay till the end, but it's still great to see the new Louis Vuitton collection in person. It's the ultimate experience. It sure is. Tomorrow all our girls will be jealous when they find out we were at the show, and I can already imagine their stretched faces." Besides her addiction to junk food, Adriana also loved to fantasize. She was good at describing pictures, what was often part of the high school fun. The friends walked around the promenade some more and went home. Miranda was still under the impression of what she had seen, but her mother's displeased voice instantly brought her down to earth. "Where are you wandering?" You promised to help me, and you ran off with your naughty girlfriend." Maria sat at the sewing machine and did not raise her head even at the appearance of her daughter. "I'm on a deadline. I can't make it. You look for something in the refrigerator because I didn't have time to cook anything." The girl went to the kitchen and checked the contents of the pot in one dish. There was no soup left at the bottom, and she put the container on the gas burner. "There's some soup left. Do you want some? I will. I haven't eaten much today. I've got a plan at work and an urgent order at home. And we've got a lot of money left just for bread. And we don't know if they'll give us our paychecks on time or if they'll keep promises again." Maria had been living in extreme mode for several years. Everything changed after her husband packed up his belongings one day and left for another woman. And it all happened so suddenly that the woman didn't even have time to realize what had happened. After all, she and Greg lived for almost 20 years, and he has never noticed any trips to the left. And then everything turned upside down in one day. I can still see the picture of her husband standing in front of her with his head bowed guiltily. "Maria, I'm sorry, but I've fallen in love with another woman. I can't help it. But don't worry, I'll take care of the kids. It's a good thing my son wasn't home at the time." But Miranda had to witness this unpleasant scene. Her daughter was 12 at the time, and she understood it. No, Miranda didn't cry. She didn't beg her father to stay. She walked up to him and said one word: "Traitor, I'll never forgive you for this." The girl said it with such contempt and even exasperation that Maria flinched. Greg was also impressed by it. He remembered even more. His voice trembled. "You shouldn't take it so hard, daughter. Time will pass and you will understand me." Miranda once again flashed her evil eyes and ran away. Her husband stood over the bulks and shifted from foot to foot in indecision. Maria said calmly but very firmly, "If you, Greg, are expecting me to fall down now, don't get your hopes up. It won't happen. If you're going to, go to your mistress. I won't cry." And he left quietly, without another word. Maria cried all evening, bent her life over the typewriter. She had no time for hysterics, because the well-being of the family depended on the speed of her work. Maria was used to the hardships of life from a young age. Her father worked at a steel mill and severely damaged his health there. Therefore, her mother had to work doubly hard in the atelier. In fact, sewing was a family craft and was passed down the female line from generation to generation. And Maria, already at school, cheated her girlfriends and later began to take orders from their mothers. She studied 2 years at a vocational school, but the qualifications of such an institution were not enough for her to take the position of a supervisor. She had to study by correspondence at the Institute of Light Industry. Her parents were very proud of their daughter. "Our daughter has made it to the people. Probably soon will be appointed director, but will overcome the next step on the career ladder." The woman did not succeed because the perestroika era came. The domestic market was flooded with beautiful foreign clothes, although their quality left much to be desired. Fashionistas were eager to buy the rags. Ateliers of individual tailoring began to close down, and Maria was also threatened with the prospect of being unemployed. It was then that the idea occurred to her that she too could sew fashionable clothes. She shared her idea with her husband, who was also at a crossroads. Greg didn't even expect that his wife's mind could come up with such sensible ideas. "Maria, you're right, aren't you? I think you should try it. I just have to figure out what the secret is to those branded pants, skirts, and other rags. There's no special secret. It's all about the blood and the fabric. And the latter is the most problematic, because you can't get real jeans here." The men objected to Maria. "Our factories also began to produce such clothes. True, the fabric is really not very good." Greg thought for a long time, and then rejoiced, exclaimed Eureka. "A brilliant idea came to me too. I forgot that my brother goes abroad. I must ask him to bring him back," somewhat cut off William. My husband's brother immediately agreed to help a relative. And soon Maria was already telling the first batch of pants of her own model. Compared to foreign clothes, her goods were cheaper, and therefore instantly sold out. Greg was satisfied. Good start. "I'm just afraid that the authorities won't be interested in our underground workshop." Maria made a good point to Greg. Nobody cares today. Everyone's trying to get a piece of the pork. Look what's going on around the plant from the hammer for nothing went. And here just skirt pants. Believe me, nobody cares about me. At least this way I'll have a paycheck. Her husband advised Maria to join forces with someone. But the woman rejected that idea too. I'll cook alone. It's calmer that way. And while I'm on maternity leave, I can earn a steady income. Soon this catastrophe in the country will be over. And again, people will be drawn to the eight-layer with their prizes. But the young woman's hopes were not destined to come true. The situation worsened every day, and the changes that were taking place dealt another powerful blow to the family. Greg was left without a job, but the couple had already adapted to the shock therapy and were not confused in this difficult situation. In general, Greg and Maria got used to doing everything together from the first days of their life together. We can safely say that they were a single unit. Probably, therefore, they were able to quickly overcome the difficulties and shocks of that difficult period. Therefore, the departure of her husband to another woman, Maria, was regarded as a stab in the back. She could expect anything from her life partner, but not betrayal. Greg tried to make up for his guilt at least by keeping his word and regularly helping the family with money. Maria knew that the unfaithful husband had moved to another city closer to the capital. His new wife, about whom she knew nothing, wanted him to do so. All contacts with her husband were reduced to occasional phone calls and monthly money transfers. Maria thought about all this while her daughter rattled dishes in the kitchen. This noisy accompaniment was annoying, and the woman shouted, "Miranda, are you a makeup artist on purpose? Or do your hands grow from the wrong place?" The girl called back from the kitchen, "Mamia, probably the second." Did not hold the lid as she slapped. "Come on, finishing work. Dinner is on the table. Only bread we have very little, but enough for today." Maria gladly sized back and did some exercises for the neck. Miranda approvingly said, "It's right. You should warm up from time to time. After dinner, I'll help you. You sit down for your lessons. You've skipped the whole evening. I've already done the rough work myself." As the modest meal was coming to an end, Maria casually said, "Father called Miranda, was washing dishes, and didn't even turn around. So what? For me, he's been dead for a long time. It was the day he traded us for another family. By the way, his mom has a new daughter now." Maria walked up to the girl and put her arm around her shoulders. "Daughter, I think you are too hard on your father. I treat him normally, as one should treat a traitor." Miranda, not everything is easy in this life. Unfortunately, marriage doesn't guarantee eternal love, so people break up. Of course, it's very painful. But if you put aside emotions, you can preserve good relations. And there are plenty of such examples. Miranda wiped her hands with a terry towel. "Mom, there's no need for preparation, just say what you want. I want you to meet your father. He's been asking for it. Dad loves you and Kevin, and he's in a lot of pain. Give him a chance. It's not hard to just meet and talk." Maria looked pleadingly at her daughter, and something shook in the girl's heart. "But you surprise me. A man did such a bad thing to you. Have you forgiven him yet? Okay, if it makes you happy, I'm willing to meet him. But that doesn't mean I've forgiven him." Maria didn't say anything. She kissed the top of her daughter's head. She left the kitchen. Greg had gotten a boost of positivity after the traditional morning jog and was now moving leisurely on the mansion's front porch. Behind him, in the same rhythm, replaced the universal favorite. But he himself had never been a dog person and was not versed in their breeds. But the cutie was special, and socializing with her was a pleasure. At first, Kelly forbade her husband to take her with him. "Greg," she said, "was not meant to run long distances with you. Her fragile body cannot withstand such loads. If something happens to her, it's all your fault. It's all your fault." The man thought all these fears were nonsense. "Kelly, all dogs are naturally hardy, and it's a quality that doesn't depend on where they come from. You should see how much the Emo enjoys exercise. Besides, as a personal trainer, I give her doses and loads of exercise. If you don't believe me, you can see for yourself." Once Kelly also put on a tracksuit, and together with her husband and Iranian Spitz went for a run, but did not wait for a separate command, and immediately began to show the mistress his skills doggy tumbling, and jumped up happily hanging. And the hostess awed with surprise, pleased with the effect produced. The man assured, "Everything, the main thing ahead is mine, but only a light warm-up." Greg was proud of his pet's preparation, but most of all he was flattered by his wife's reaction. Kelly was in a state of childlike delight, which made her face even more attractive. Greg didn't even expect you to have the talent of a real trainer. "No, honey, you're wrong. I am both the personal and fitness trainer of this adorable dog. By the way, would you consider developing this line of business? It seems to me that no one has treaded in this field yet. I should think about it." Thanks for the hint, but didn't like the fact that the hosts were distracted from her person. And she's those 2 times letting them know it's time for a run. Greg, got that message right, Kelly. Then we'll talk about how the sea has caught fire and requires a training schedule. The doggy skipped ahead along the path, and the man followed Kelly in a slow rhythm. Kelly had nothing else to do, and she too joined the runner. Later at breakfast, the woman confessed, "Your system really works. I have to admit, I didn't expect it to be so invigorating. Perhaps we, Vanessa, should adopt this useful experience." Vanessa, Kelly's daughter from her first marriage, refused the offer. "Are you guys trying to ruin me? At school, we're always being bullied. They make us run around at home." The mother tried to calm her daughter. "No one is forcing you, but it is useful. I even like it, so let her run instead of me. I'd rather lie in a warm bed for half an hour." Disputes between mother and daughter often arose in the family of status businesswomen, but Greg never interfered in them. He generally tried to keep a low profile all these almost 6 years, as he had before he moved into this posh mansion. The man thought back to his first family every day, or rather, his first wife and children continued to occupy most of his mind. When he woke up in the morning, he wondered how they were. He wished them good night before he went to bed too. Of course, he didn't tell anyone about this split consciousness because he was afraid of Kelly's reaction. In their years together, they had never really bonded. Just lived under the same roof, but this way of coexistence was comfortable for both, and the spouses did not want to change anything. Fate brought them together by chance, and it happened under circumstances not quite pleasant for the gene. Greg, like his father, was used to relying only on his own strength. He had learned from a young age that life's goods could be obtained only by hard and honest labor. So Greg worked without a day off, first on long-distance flights, and then received permission to travel to European countries. But this good fortune quickly ended because their bus fleet became the private property of one guy. It is good that the man managed to buy an old Nissan, otherwise his family would have been in a catastrophic situation. Bus workers were laid off in droves, regardless of their past performance. Greg found himself on the sidelines too. Then Maria. Greg gave him the idea. "We've got a car that's just sitting in the garage. You should try a cab service." That's what everyone does today. Greg consulted a knowledgeable person who was wary of the initiative. "Greg, in principle, you can get into this business, but there are risks, and not insignificant ones. Now there is a redistribution of zones of influence, and you can accidentally run into the tough guys. I'm aware of that. But you can protect yourself. You can. But it's going to cost you a lot of money. Although if you keep a low profile, that is, if you don't go into crowded places, you can make a lot of money with a quiet meeting." Greg asked his friend to explain the details. "I don't get it. You're talking in riddles? Give me specifics." This conversation took place in the garage, where he and his army comrade had decided to have some privacy. After that question, his friend looked at him for a long time. He probably didn't want to spill his secrets so easily. All right. I'll tell you the subtleties of this kind of income. I'm on the road myself sometimes in the evenings. If I'm lucky, I get a ride. Otherwise, I mostly sell vodka from under the table." Greg was surprised you could do that. "You can't. But when I'm in a pinch, I have to take risks. The main thing is not to get caught in the eyes of guys who can get into trouble, but they also want to eat sandwiches with caviar. That's why they shake our brother. But you can work it out with them." "We can. But the roof will cost you more than the car. That's why it's better to work my way. I mean, you get out of the neighborhood. And back home. Don't go for the big bucks. It's better to take a little, That often. Thanks for the tip. I got it. Greg took everything his friend had warned him about into account, and for a few months everything went smoothly and without adventure. But one day he decided to take a little risk and took on board two dudes who urgently needed to go to a country village. Seemed like normal passengers. They asked, "Listen, Commander, we need to get to Kira Village. Here you will drop it." Greg was already anticipating getting a solid cosh, because it was 40 kilometers to the named settlement, and readily said, "No problem. I'll take you with the breeze if you agree with the fare." The guys nodded and fell silent in the back seat. Everything was fine as long as they were within the city limits. But as soon as they hit the highway, a chill ran down Greg's spine. There were many stories among drivers about how greed had led not only to the forfeiture of a motor vehicle, but also to the death of the owner himself. Greg made a sharp turn and braked sharply at the curb. "Guys, you're here for a minute. Are you bored?" "I'm going to the woods for a little necessity." He didn't wait for the passengers to answer and jumped out of the car. Two types rushed after him. The guys turned out to be sharp and quickly caught up with him. One professional blow was enough for the uncooperative driver to end up on the asphalt. Greg gulped air, trying to equalize his breathing. Most likely, everything would have ended sadly if not for the passing cars. A cool foreign car slowed down over stylish high-heeled boots. Greg realized that it was a woman who dared to intervene in the fight. He couldn't see what was happening above his field of vision because one thug was still pinning him against Osvaldo, but he could clearly hear the woman screaming, "Ah, you freaks. Take that, you bastards." She hit the bandits with something heavy because one of them let out an inhuman scream and the other one rushed to his aid. "Gray, she crippled you." Greg had only a few seconds to assume an upright position. He lifted the one squirming in pain by the scruff of his neck. "Confess, son of a bitch. Who sent you?" The boy was struggling in a tight embrace. "You've crossed Miho's path. You're working against the law. Let go. You're hurting me." Greg threw his opponent into the bushes. "You better not get caught by me again." Having received the instruction, the bandit immediately got up and showed in the forest belt, where his friend was already waiting for him. The woman, who was not afraid to stand up for Greg, calmly stowed in the trunk the means of influencing the bandits. The man looked at the impressively sized metal object. "Wow, you could have nailed them. That's one of two possibilities. Either they kill you, or did I bring them to their senses? To be honest, I was expecting you to say thank you. You're worried about the gangsters." It was already quite dark, so Greg couldn't see the face of his savior, but he guessed from the calls and the voice that she was a young woman. He felt embarrassed for his tactlessness. "I'm sorry. I was confused out of habit. I mean, it's not every day you get a feeling like that. I'm very grateful for your help. You're my savior angel. One simple thing will satisfy me. Thank you." The woman turned her back on him and headed for her car. Greg rushed after her. "Don't leave me alone on this road. The bandits might come back." She laughed. "I love a man with a healthy sense of humor. You almost got sent to the grave 10 minutes ago. And you're already making jokes. Well, if you still need my tutelage, I can escort you. No, let me walk you out. In principle, I don't mind. But my residence is a bit far from here. That's all right. I like long distances." The lady, whose face he could not see, rode ahead, and he followed her. When she stopped near a pompous-looking mansion, Greg even whistled. "You're in for it, Greg. God forbid the lady's husband shows up. Then you'll think of the bandits as moderate Afghans. But in place of the husband, a girl of about 13 years old ran out and hung around the woman's neck. Greg realized that he was a witness to a touching family scene and already wanted to turn around when we called him. "Why are you standing there? I invite you to visit." The three of them drank tea and talked about nothing. Vanessa, the mansion owner's daughter, talked excitedly about her school life. In this, she was so similar to his daughter. The man involuntarily smiled at the thought. "And the landlady asked about your daughter too." He marveled at her insight. "I didn't know that you not only wield a wrench, but can also read minds. Yes, I have 2 sons and a daughter. My son is a freshman in college. Miranda's in 5th grade. She's probably a couple years younger than your girl?" You guessed it. Vanessa's in 7th grade. She's going through the most unpredictable time right now. I have her in a private school. I feel safer that way. There's good supervision. Vanessa mumbled under her breath like a juvenile detention center. Kelly glared menacingly at her daughter, and she politely said goodbye to her guest. It was nice to meet you. But I have to get to class. You two talk. There was an obvious hint in the teenager's wish, and the woman blushed. She agreed at once. Vanessa took her guest around the floors and enjoyed her confusion. We have a guest room here, and each room has its own bathroom. Too bad we don't get many guests. Miranda treaded carefully on the carpeted walkway and did not hide her admiration. I thought it was only in the movies. Vanessa arrogantly remarked, it's just a part of life I'm used to. My mom got it into her head that I should have the best of everything, and I study in a private gymnasium. And then I have tutors coming to my house twice a week to learn foreign languages. Miranda looked at Vanessa with undisguised envy. Are you lucky? I'm only in the school program. Wanting to increase her status in the eyes of her stepsister even more, Vanessa proudly declared, without knowledge of languages today, there is nowhere to go, of course. I, for example, am going to make a name for myself in the modeling business. Not just one foreigners to be trendsetters. By the way, I already have some ideas. You want me to show you? Miranda's excitement was at an all-time high. After all, the entrepreneur's daughter had touched on her favorite subject. She as mesmerized went after Vanessa, who was going to amaze the guest with her own collection. But the expected reaction did not follow. Miranda, with a bored look, flipped through albums with sketches and commented, this was already there. And this dress model was in last year's collection from the House of Versus. The smile slowly slid off Seema's face, and she snatched her album out of her guest's hands. One would think you thought something of modern fashion, Miranda said in a friendly manner. I've been into it a little since I was a kid. Everyone in my family is a dressmaker. My mom still sews custom orders. I help her sometimes. I give her tips. What fashion detail can you add? Vanessa felt humiliated, but tried to hide it. She sneeringly remarked, you're like Cinderella. Why do you keep walking around? Did I offend you? Did you tell me about your hobbies? I told you about mine. What's wrong with that? Miranda spoke in the same friendly tone. Although she wanted to sass the arrogant girl, Vanessa pulled herself together. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. It's just that this whole thing's been a pain in the ass. You're right, aren't you? We have a lot in common, and our friendship will be good for both of us. After the tour of the mansion, Vanessa dragged Miranda away to her hangout, and they spent a rather pleasant evening in the company of young people. To her friends, she introduced her as her half-sister. The rest of the evening was unremarkable, aside from getting to know Gary. After the formal part, Vanessa took Miranda aside and whispered in her ear, what do you think of this shot? The girl shrugged uncertainly. I don't think it's anything special. Just an ordinary guy. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Ordinary. You have no idea who his father is. Miranda assumed indifferently, judging by the look on your face. He owns factories, newspapers, steamships. I didn't guess. Gary's dad has absolutely nothing to do with business. He works for the Department of Natural Resources. Do you realize how big that guy is? No, I don't. I don't need to. Before going to bed, Vanessa thought about Gary again. He's studying at MGI. No. Imagine what the future holds for the girl who marries him. Miranda was amazed by this girl's revelation. Vanessa, you're only 17. Are you thinking about marriage? I, for one, haven't even thought about it yet. But that's understandable. You're 2 years younger than me, a year and a half to be exact. But it's still you. And I have to think about my studies now. And then I have to think about all sorts of things, don't I? Vanessa sighed heavily. In principle, you're right. But if you let this question go to the ground for a prominent fiancé can be taken away from under your nose, then you mom will not help. The girls are really looking at Gary, so I need to be on the lookout. She's at that age now. Sometimes she can be out of control, so you have to be patient. Kelly told Greg about mastering the easy life. And at the end of her story, she concluded that uninformed people think that entrepreneurs don't have much money. But believe me, success in this niche is not easy. Basically, today you have seen for yourself that you can pay with your life even for a small success. That's why it all comes down to this. It's not easy for me. The woman looked at the luxurious furnishings of the dining room where they were drinking tea and continued. There were losses along the way too. My husband couldn't stand it and ran away from me. But I don't judge him. Not all men are ready to be around. Strong women are, and I am strong. Kelly looked at him with a different look and laughed. I don't know why I'm being so open with you. It's not really my thing. Greg spent a little over an hour in the house of a new acquaintance, but it was a quiet conversation. Turned his life upside down. He was magnetically drawn to this intelligent and very attractive woman. Kelly left him her card and he called her the next day. The secret trysts continued for almost a year, and the man himself realized one day that he couldn't go on like this. Kelly, we need to take our relationship to a whole new level. Although she had been waiting for those words for a long time, she was wary of them. Greg, about your family, you thought about your wife and children. I think about them every day, but I can't torn between two poles, as sad as it is to admit. But feelings for Maria have long since cooled. What's left is duty or obligation. I don't know which is more appropriate to define the feeling that keeps me stuck. But my greatest fear is losing you, Kelly. You're an extraordinary woman, and you make me feel especially comfortable. Kelly was silent, but that silence spoke of her agreement. That same evening, Greg drew a bold line under his past life. Marusha appeared to understand him, but his daughter, in whom he cared deeply, called her father a traitor, and this caused unbearable pain, before which even time was powerless. Greg sent money faithfully, but Maria sent the transfers back. When he called and asked her to explain, the woman said, "We don't need handouts, we can live without them. I am still able to feed myself and the children." Only once the woman hid her pride in a far corner and asked for help herself. When Kevin entered the institute, Greg transferred the required amount of money the same day. But the man hoped that he still managed one day to melt the ice of distrust. He knew about his daughter's passion, and when Kelly decided to try her hand at modeling, he called his wife again. "Maria, I know Miranda doesn't want to hear from me, but please tell me that sometimes it's good to let go of your ambitions. This rule is especially true when one is striving for a certain goal." Maria gave Miranda her father's message verbatim. Miranda thought about it for 2 days, and on the third day she asked her mother to call and tell him that I agreed to meet him. Greg showed up the next day, afraid to spoil the result. He didn't bother his daughter with gifts. They visited an exhibition of modern paintings together. Then they sat in a cafe. Just before leaving, her father gently hinted that Miranda should meet his new family. The girl had unexpectedly agreed. In her short life, Miranda had gotten used to an environment where everyone was on the same page. Of course, there were children of wealthy parents in their class, but they did not flaunt their material prosperity because they were afraid of the peers' disapproval. Moms and dads who were ordinary working people. So the luxury of the mansion where her father now lived with his new family struck a chord with the girl. Greg really wanted his daughter and Vanessa to bond, and he asked his stepdaughter to give Miranda a little tour. "Why are you fixated on this guy? Isn't there anyone else out there worthy?" "Maybe there is, but I like Gary. I'm used to pursuing my goals." In the few days of the guest period, Miranda had grown tired of being surprised by the quirks of Vanessa and the rest of the mansion's inhabitants. She liked Baby the best of all. The cute dog immediately recognized in the girl a friend, which surprised Kelly. She said, "She knows people very well. And if she pays so much attention to you, it means that you are a very kind person. If you have a desire, I can introduce you to the behind-the-scenes part of the modeling business. My dad said you're interested in this field." It took a girl's breath away. "Thank you. I'd really like to see it for myself. Dad said you design your own collections." "It's true." Kelly stared at the girl. She felt uncomfortable under that gaze. "Dad's exaggerating. I only won a special prize at one competition 2 years ago for a small series made of fabric from domestic manufacturers. But such things are hardly relevant today." "You're wrong. World designers have long been working with simple and environmentally safe fabrics. And today, clothes made of wool and other natural fabrics are in the main trends. Miranda looked at her father's wife with respect. "You know so much." The woman smiled tiredly. "The position obliges all those who work in this business are not allowed to lag behind the train. Pardon me for bombarding you with so much incomprehensible information. With practice, you'll learn more quickly what's useful in life." Kelly did have a unique ability to anticipate future events. After Miranda, with her help, familiarized herself with the kitchen of the fashion business, popular stereotypes collapsed in the girl's mind. She, on the other hand, got a glimpse of her dream, which helped her to determine the exact path to her goal. Leaving, she thanked Kelly. "Thank you so much. You have no idea what you have done for me." Vanessa watched with jealousy as her mother kissed this imposter. She really wanted to cry, but she only clenched her fists. And in her young heart, a grain of hatred was already ripening. 5 years passed. All these years, Miranda small, but confidently Misha hands moved towards her dream. In principle, the cherished dream of a young girl has acquired the features of the main goals. In overcoming this difficult path, she helped not only her father, but also Kelly. Miranda, not without her help, entered the institute to design clothes, which at the time was incredibly difficult. The girl became a frequent guest at the mansion, and business less, which caused her mother's displeasure. One day, Maria did not hold back with reproaches. "Daughter, don't you think that you frequent citizen, so you can change your place of residence and forget about your mother?" Miranda was surprised at her mother's reaction. "Mom, don't be silly. Not so long ago you yourself insisted that I keep in touch with my father, and why do you call them citizen if they live relatively far from the capital?" Maria smirked. "I'm much more comfortable with geographical subtleties. It's you educated ones who understand everything. And you don't feel the ground under your feet? If, in fact, I have nothing against my father. But you're in love with what's her name, aren't you?" Maria pretended not to remember the name of her father's wife. Miranda told her Kelly's name. "And you shouldn't say that, Mom. She's a good woman. She's been a great help to me. So maybe you're calling her Mom now, too. You forget she took your father away from you." Such a negative attitude of Maria Vasilievna explained not only inexplicable, from her point of view, the behavior of her daughter failed maternal expectation, and son Constantine, back in the institute, has already managed to get his own family and moved away from his parents' home, although he often called and tried to visit his mother if possible. The woman began to feel cold loneliness, so she wanted with all her might to keep her daughter near her. But the loving mother did not realize that her selfishness was tying the girl's hands. But the worst was ahead for both mother and daughter. Miranda did not hide from Maria that she liked the capital's life. In many respects, this mood was facilitated by the small successes of the novice fashion designer. She sometimes showed Kelly her sketches, and the latter chose the models she liked. "This looks very promising. Well done, girl, you're making progress. And this suit can be included in the fall-winter collection." At first, Miranda was happy to have at least a small opportunity to promote her work, but her name was never heard among the authors of branded collections. This is exactly what she dreamed of. Kelly did not immediately pay attention to Miranda's sour mood. "Aren't you happy that your ideas have been developed?" And to be honest, not really. Episodes don't mean anything. I want to come out with a full Kelly collection. Looked at her with that look that many years ago first confused the girl. With some irony, the woman said, "My girl, many people spend their whole lives going for success. One should be able to rejoice in small achievements. You don't have to go far for examples. All of Vanessa's work is scrapped by the committee. And unfortunately, I can't do anything to help my own daughter. But I try to support you in every possible way, not to please your father, but because you really have talent." Miranda knew of her half-sister's many attempts to make a name for herself, but each time she had failed miserably, forcing the family to change the field of activity, and she was now solely engaged in model selection. They were notorious. Everyone who dared to audition was afraid of failure. Vanessa's character also underwent a major change, but her mother hoped that marriage would affect her daughter. Although Vanessa had already been engaged to Gary for a year, young people were in no hurry to announce the wedding. In the personal life of Miranda herself also underwent changes. When she was in her final year of study, she was proposed to by Zach. They studied in the same school, so the natural process of rebirth of childhood friendship into love did not surprise anyone. Zach's father was a petty official in the city administration and really wanted his son to achieve something more in his life. So he wasn't very happy about it. The fact that the only heir decided to tie his family to his partner's daughter. The man did not even hesitate to show up unannounced at Maria's place and say everything he thinks in her eyes. When the woman saw the unnamed guest, she politely invited him into the apartment. Andrew walked through the modestly furnished rooms in his shoes. I understand that this is where the girl who has a dead grip on my son lives. Although Maria has seen a lot of things in her life, she has never met such insolent people. She even for a few minutes lost the power of speech, but then confidently said, "Who are you to break into the house and say nasty things to my daughter? You show up uninvited, not even once, like decent people do." Andrew didn't even raise an eyebrow. He deftly turned on the heels of his stylish shoes and proudly declared Isaac's father. The landlady didn't let him continue. "I see the father of that underachiever who doesn't give a pass to my girl. And I am also strongly against this marriage, because your son is not worthy of Miranda's little finger. You can't hide anything from people. They're talking bad about your Zach. For instance, rumors of his tethered car business are still circulating." Andrew's face became a word of indignation. "It's all lies. My son is not involved in any affairs, so I advise you not to engage in gossip gathering." The man also honorably in military style turned around, kicked the heels, expensive shoes in the cheap palace and stamping step went out of the apartment. Maria barely waited for her daughter to arrive so she could tell her everything she thought. Miranda didn't realize that her mother had prepared to give her a hard time, throwing off her coat and street shoes in the hallway. She rushed to hug her mother. Maria pulled her away. "I don't want to hug yours." The girl was surprised by such a cold reception. "Mammy, who dared to hurt you? Tell me, and you're asking me." Without making surprised eyes. "Miranda, why did you tell me who you've been making out with? Why is the last thing your mother will know is that you're thinking of getting married?" A series of these questions took the girl by surprise, and she began to justify herself. "Mom, I didn't tell you anything because Zach and I just applied the other day. I thought it was a nice surprise, and you're laughing. What am I supposed to laugh about when your boyfriend's dad comes into the apartment and slops all over me and you too? Andrew came to see you." Miranda sank down on the couch. Maria felt sorry for her daughter. "Yeah, he showed up and started scratching his tongue. A little to the right, put it on." The woman sat down next to her daughter. "Why do you need a fiancé with such a dubious reputation? I'm ashamed to even tell you the rumors about him." "You mean cars? If only cars. They say he's a womanizer, and one cheating husband almost killed him in the act. That's why I sent his daddy away from here, so that the story would be forgotten. And he put that guy on the record. That's why it's dangerous to mess with that family." Miranda didn't want to believe her mother. "Zach's mom isn't like that. I've known him since I was a kid. People like to exaggerate. Well, look, daughter, you'll have to repent later." Soon Miranda and Zach formalized their relationship, taking into account the dislike of parents to each other. Young people did not organize a noisy wedding. They did not want to overshadow the solemn day with squabbles and scandals. Greg understood his daughter and was not offended. But Maria was reading Miranda again. "All normal people do a wedding, invite guests. Your father and I had a feast in our time too. People partied for a week. Our wedding was remembered around town for a long time. And you and your Zach are still sneaking around like criminals." Maria was giving herself away with her statements. Miranda's daughter, Miranda, began to visit her less and less often, limiting herself to calling her on Saturdays. Now the only consolation for the rapidly aging woman were visits from her girlfriend and daughter Adriana. The broken-hearted damsel in distress had become a respected person in town. Adriana learned to be a doctor and kept appointments at the neighborhood clinic. To Maria, she ran to take her blood pressure and have a little talk. The woman complained, "I never thought my daughter would do that to me." Adriana was aware of the latest developments and tried to calm the naked woman down. Maria Miranda has not forgotten you and will never disown her mother. It's just that you shouldn't have interfered in her private life. But this Zackov, you know him. Knowing Masha's aunts and aunts, I've said 100 times that he won't make a good husband. But you yourself know that if Miranda balks, it is useless to try to change her mind. Maria knew her daughter very well and was very sorry for pushing her away. But she could not get over her pride and admit the fault. Miranda, I had already had my 10th dream when Zack showed up at home. He didn't turn on the light and silently snuck into the bedroom. But Miranda woke up and asked excitedly, "Where have you been?" "All evening I was waiting for you, Gold. I had very important business to attend to during the night." Why do you women immediately start thinking bad thoughts? When my husband gets home late, me and my men stopped by the bar and had a few beers. I hope that's not a crime. You be wise to keep your head down. What do you think about in cases like this? Give me some advice. The dream disappeared, and Miranda turned on the supervisor. The man wrinkled his nose at the bright light. Turn it off. It's different now. What will the board be then? Will you hit me or will you humiliate me again? Nothing surprises me anymore. By the way, you should take a shower or something. After getting comfortable under the blanket, the man jumped to his feet. What were you just implying? The very thing you were thinking of. The situation was heating up, and the verbal altercation could become a full-fledged scandal. Zack was at a loss for words, and you wonder why I come home late. You're as prickly as a hedgehog. You're scary to touch. I understand if you had a great exterior, but you're just gray. And I'm not a dog to be judged on my exterior in relation to my grayness. You weren't embarrassed by my appearance before, because you were blind and didn't see it in time. Zack had achieved his goal. Miranda was crying, since sometime his wife's tears gave him pleasure, and he tried to humiliate her at every opportunity. This pathological desire came in many forms. Thus, once at a social gathering organized by Kelly, he in the presence of his half-sister unflattering comments about his wife's talent. Even if you had an effect on Miranda, instead of caring for her husband, she sits for hours on her dubious projects. And I could understand that diligence if the end justified the means. But what Boston is given is beyond the reach of an ox. A well-known expression the man uttered with pomp. Vanessa was very pleased under the returned opportunity to bite Zack's half-sister. I agree with you completely. Alas, talent is not given to everyone. But I believe that the ability to keep a man around requires strength and dedication too. And if I had such a man by my side, I would definitely forget about everything in the world. Her husband and sister spoke as if Miranda was not around, had not escaped her notice. And the fact that Vanessa was openly making eyes at her husband. Watching them was disgusting. And Miranda, without saying goodbye to Kelly, went home. She cried all night, and her husband didn't show up until morning. But Zack didn't even apologize for his impromptu outburst. He also accused his wife of being an autocrat. Miranda, before it's too late, get out of your chicken head. I've seen your sketches. They're all primitive. Nothing worthwhile. The young woman was outraged. Since when did you, a construction engineer, start to know about fashion? I have a natural sense of taste, and my degree has nothing to do with my profession. You're trying to push mediocre work. I'm sorry to be so blunt, but someone has to tell you the truth. But Kelly has a different opinion, and I trust her more than I trust you. She promised me that next season she would definitely include 2 of my new collections in a presentation album. Haha. There's no harm in dreaming. Kelly is a very kind woman. She just feels sorry for you. She even got you a job at her company out of compassion. If she wanted you out in the world, she would have done it a lot sooner. Miranda had to admit her husband was right about a lot of things. Indeed, many of her hopes had not been realized. She thought that immediately after the institute she would do what she loved, that is, designing beautiful clothes. But it was impossible to find a job in the capital. Kelly offered her a position in her company, and she accepted. The manager's work was tedious and did not make her satisfied. But Miranda patiently waited for her star hour, hoping for Kelly's mediation. But one day, that single thread. suddenly severed when the owner of the company was killed in an accident. Kelly was a good driver. She made daily trips to the capital and back to the countryside. But on that tragic day, the woman failed to control the car and crashed into a tree, receiving many incompatible with life injuries. Such a conclusion was made by investigators after examining the scene of the accident. One expert in glasses put forward the following hypothesis of what happened after the rain. The road is slippery. That's why the car was thrown to the side of the road. Greg refused to believe in this version and demanded a more detailed examination. For the sake of appearances, serious specialists were summoned from the capital. You couldn't just dismiss the man. Kelly was a well-known personality in the business world. The experts worked on the car for several hours, but found nothing suspicious. The car was in good working order, so your wife was responsible for the accident. Vanessa was hysterical during the funeral ceremony. Miranda and Zach didn't move away from her and Greg Stepanovich, but grieved, and the daughter of the deceased businessman was not long. On the 9th day, when traditionally everyone gathered to commemorate the deceased, Vanessa said, "The company is now legally vested in me. I hope, Uncle Greg, you will not contest that right." The widow cast a glance in her stepdaughter's direction. "Vanessa, don't you think you picked a bad time to divide the inheritance? Let's save the family issues for later. Mom's lawyers can help us figure it out. I've already talked to them. Of course, they're on the side of the law, but I don't think you should mess with me. The right thing to do would be to give up your part of it right away." Greg pounded the table, "And they intend to discuss it now. You would, at least out of respect for your mother, Vanessa, openly mocked your stepfather. Uncle Greg, you're doing a great job playing a widower. Are you allowed to be in movies? That's not what I'm talking about. I think we should dot the proverbial I's right off the bat. You were my mom's lawfully wedded husband for a short time, and I'm still a daughter. And frankly, I don't want to share our family's property with anyone." Everyone at the memorial meal was taken aback by Vanessa's defiant behavior. The guests began to leave the table one by one, and someone whispered loudly, "God forbid. God, to have such a daughter." Vanessa heard everything, but only smirked evilly, and about Tolstoy to me criticism does not take. But let's return to our sheep, that is, to the question of inheritance. Of course, Uncle Greg, I won't put you out on the street, but I'll sell this nice house. I'll live in an apartment in the capital. I'll compensate you. I hope you'll be happy with that. The man only said one thing in response. "We didn't realize you were such an asshole." The girl in some wild rage danced and began to clap her hands. "Yes, I am. And I don't care what you think. Finally, I can do what I want to do. And I won't have to see put-upon faces around me and listen to insistent speeches." Miranda was uncomfortable with this scene, and she pulled her husband towards the exit. "Let's go. We shouldn't be looking at this." You can see Vanessa's not herself, but Zach stood staring admiringly at Vanessa. Miranda barely managed to get him out of the mansion. Greg was waiting for them on the front porch steps. "Miranda, are you going into town? How about a ride? If it's not too much trouble. I can't stay in this house any longer. You see what kind of mood in. Daddy, it's probably just a case of shock. Losing a mom is a terrible grief. Anyone can break down. All the way to town, no one said a word." It wasn't until the end of the drive that Zach asked Miranda, "I have to go to work right away." Stopping at the office, the woman looked at her husband with surprise, but complied with his request. When Zach hurriedly jumped out of the car, she invited her father to her house, but he refused. "For me, daughter, do not worry. I have my own corner." How did I feel? I made sure I had a place to live. Even if it's a one-bedroom, it'll last me a lifetime. Kelly gave it to me when she was still alive. Like she sensed I'd have to find a place to live. They said goodbye warmly, and Miranda went to the apartment she and her husband had been renting for almost 2 years. At first, she wanted to work on her collection, but she soon realized that she was not in a good mood for a fruitful process. After the clowning around at Vanessa's wake, everything was falling apart. The half-sister's threats were thorns in her brain, and Miranda realized she had to find another job. Zach came again after midnight, but she didn't want to find out where her husband was. The man, apparently, was also tired from the excitement of the last few days. and with curses to her, he settled down on the sofa in the living room. In a few minutes, he was already wheezing. Miranda thought, do I have to endure humiliation from him for the rest of my life? I thought I would have a real strong family. I'd have children at the thought of children. Tears came to my eyes. Zach didn't even want to hear about it. Miranda, I'm not old enough to be a father. What kind of mother are you? You can't even get your act together here. And when the baby comes, will you lose yourself? Several times she tried to contradict her husband Zach. Difficulties are inevitable, but everything goes through them. Besides, you can't put off having kids forever. The years go by. Age is no obstacle for a man. I'm going to ask you very much not to have this conversation again. Well, I'll tell you when I feel I'm ready to procreate. Miranda was very hurt by her husband's rejection. She felt incomplete or inferior, but with time this feeling dulled. When rumors reached her that Zach was having affairs with other women, she stopped thinking about procreation altogether. More and more often humiliated and insulted women began to think that she should break up with Zach, but she didn't know how to do it yet. When Miranda appeared in Vanessa's office, she was waited for in the reception room of the head of the company. You really are a clock, and I was so eager to catch you in the act of violating labor discipline. Miranda threw a punch, and I see you're eager to take the director's chair. At least you'd have the decency to honor your mother's memory. I don't give a damn about decorum. You better tell me, sister, are you going to work? Or have you decided to quit? Second application. Miranda handed her new supervisor a typed sheet of paper. Even though you haven't been approved yet, sign it. You have to tease me. You can't do it without it. You should have asked me. Okay, sister, leave me alone. And don't worry about my new position because there are no other candidates. My stepfather got it right and gave up his seat without any unnecessary bloodshed. Miranda is tired of listening to the smug upstart. Stop showing off, sign your autograph, and I'll be on my way. The new head of the company signed her name, but she did not give the document to Miranda. Listen, sister, what do you do for everyone? Everybody's really into you. Even Gary had a whole box of compliments for you. Miranda extended her hand to Vanessa. I don't care what your Gary says. Just give me the application and I'll go. No, look, you listen to me. Gary ran away from me. Imagine that. The bastard broke off our engagement and drove off to an undisclosed location. No, he explained himself to me. Said we weren't a couple, that I was too impulsive. He held you up as an example, and Mom always thought you were a role model too. I don't want to be a role model. I want to be me. Miranda saw that her half-sister was on the verge of a breakdown and tried to calm her down. Vanessa, it's hard for you now, but you have to get over this nightmare and everything will be fine. Vanessa pushed her away roughly. Yeah, screw you and your advice. Don't you realize that I hate you, you know? I hate you. Take your statement and get out of here. And remember, you'd better stay out of my way. Miranda took the application and carefully closed the door behind her. She looked into her department to say goodbye to her coworkers. Everyone sat with tense faces, and at her appearance, they asked with glee how her new broom was doing. Not good. I feel for you guys. You're going where? I don't know yet, but any job will do for me right now anyway. Miranda prepared herself for the long process of finding a job, but the problem was resolved unexpectedly, quickly. She was wandering around the city, and she happened to come across an advertisement for a private silhouette tailoring workshop printed on a printer. Women's outerwear craftsmen required for permanent employment. Miranda read the ad several times and smiled. She immediately remembered about her mother, who used the old terminology out of habit. She must be jealous of those. It was a nice old lady or a lady of balsamic age for her. She wrote down the address, but it turned out that the workshop was only 10 meters away from the place where the ad was painted. Miranda's hunch was right, and when she asked to be escorted to the manager's office, a thin woman in her 50s rose from the reception desk like a schoolgirl. I'm the superintendent, the successor, and the cashier all rolled into one Betty. What's your business? Miranda nodded to the working street. And there I saw your ad. Do you have any experience? You look very young. Pardon me for asking. Miranda took out her documents from her purse. Here's that diploma. I worked 2 years at Vesta. I mostly dealt with paperwork though. Betty opened the document. "Oh, you're a designer. I'll admit, it's the first time I've ever seen a live designer. A new profession. But I like the word fashion designer better. I'm very glad you stopped by. But I must warn you, our pay is not very high. We just opened recently, so we don't have a steady clientele yet. Is that part of the job you can trust me to manage?" I did the management. That was the second joy that had come over Betty so unexpectedly. Miranda returned home in high spirits and thought about this surprisingly pleasant woman. A person of that age is not afraid to open her own workshop, and I should seriously consider starting my own company. Let it be quite small, but it will allow me to realize my own developments. But most importantly, I won't have to depend on other people. To Mongol's surprise, Zach was at home in the kitchen, and his activity was evidenced by dirty dishes and grease stains on the stove. "Zach, you couldn't have been neater. Now I have to wash the whole kitchen after your cooking." Men together with a full plate in his hands jumped past the wife as not fractured. If you clean up a little behind the beloved husband. "You're early today. Why should I be?" Zach shouted from the room. "Don't you like it? When I come in late, I don't come in well. You're early today too. It's better not to spoil my appetite." Miranda was immediately discouraged from sharing her news with her husband. But after lunch, Zach approved and said with a solemn look that you are silent. "You don't say anything about the change in leadership, and has anything changed, except that Vanessa has settled into the director's chair?" The man made a puzzled expression on his face. "Well, for example, your husband is now on staff and will be head of security. I wonder why Vanessa gave you that position. You don't need to know everything. In fact, I don't really want to. For your information, I no longer work for this company." Zach ran up to his wife and patted her shoulder happily. "You did the right thing. Switch to something else. You're already obsessed with your collections. You can't get too crazy that way." Miranda was quickly drawn into her new job. She stopped sharing with her husband. They seldom talked about exciting topics at all. In the evenings, sneaking away from Zach, Miranda worked on new models of her sketchbook. She folded them neatly in a folder. One day, she decided to change something in the collection that Kelly had once wanted to take. But the folder from that series was out of place. Miranda turned everything over in her desk, but it had no effect. In the evening, she asked her husband if you happened to see my green folder. "Zach, eyes bulging, what do I need your pictures for? And why do you need that stupid green folder? You promised you wouldn't waste any more time on useless work. There were sketches in there that I need right now. Just some elements I can use for my real work. You're incorrigible. I'd love to help you, but I haven't seen that green folder. Look harder. You must have put it somewhere, and now you can't find it." Miranda never found her missing work. But the miraculous disappearances didn't stop there. More sketches started disappearing. So she decided to put her husband up against the wall. "Zach, you're the one who went through my papers. Put back what you took." The man backed away from his wife. She was out of her mind. Think about it. Why would I want a normal man to see your drawings? The husband went out to the balcony, but soon returned. "Miranda, I swear, one more stunt like that, and I'll put you in the hospital." If only there was something to take, but it's a ridiculous thing that thinks it's something else. Miranda cried all evening again, and Zach went about his business. After that incident, the woman took her files to work. The mystery of the disappearance soon came to light, and it happened completely by accident. One Friday afternoon, Betty invited Miranda over to her partition. "Tell me, Miranda, how do you feel about fashion shows?" "Very positively. When I was a young girl, I was lucky enough to attend one once. It was an unforgettable experience. So many years have passed, and I still remember each girl's face and outfits. It's nice to see you like-minded. I love going to such presentations too. Not only does it help in my work, but it's good for my mood. I hope you will not refuse to keep me company with great pleasure. Where's the presentation being held?" "West is hosting a fashion show. I believe you used to work there." "Yeah, and I'm dying to go to the event. The show was on Sunday." Miranda was pleased to be back in that unique atmosphere of the festival, when beauty appears before the audience in all its splendor. About halfway through the program, the host came to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, just a moment. Attention. Now in our program is the debut, and you will see a stunning winter collection. I advise you to remember this name because the models you are about to see will be the main trends of the season. Miranda, holding her breath, began to wait. The hall also froze in anticipation. Only Betty whispered to Vanessa, "This is the daughter of the former mistress who crashed last year." I know, the music started playing and the girls came out to Miranda's defile. She didn't immediately realize why she felt uneasy. It wasn't until a few minutes later that she realized that all the outfits the girls were showing off had been made up by her. She wanted to shout at the whole hall that it was her collection, but she froze in a daze. The audience loudly applauded the family who came out at the conclusion of the show. The half-sister was wearing an evening gown that Miranda also recognized at a glance. She was burning with the desire to deal with her sister on the spot now. The girl began to make her way through the cheering crowd, the backstage area hidden from view. A security guard tried to turn her around, but then recognized her and let her through. "If you're looking for Vanessa, she's in her office." There was no one in the waiting room, and Miranda jerked open the door to the principal's office. But what came into view took her breath away. Zach and Vanessa were there. They were so engrossed that they hadn't noticed the presence of the betrayed wife. Miranda shouted, "Stop it." Zach jumped up from the table and began hastily tidying his clothes. But Vanessa didn't even move. "Miranda, what's your fashion for barging in at the worst possible moment? Couldn't you have waited a little longer at this moment?" Miranda didn't realize it. She sprang up to her student's collapsed form and slapped her across the face. "My collection wasn't enough for you. You stole my husband from me." Vanessa bequeathed Zach. "What are you standing there flapping your eyes? Get your pillow wife away from me." But the man stood as if his feet were glued to the floor. Miranda didn't even dignify him with a glance. She left the lovers alone. "You may continue." All the way home, she held back tears. But once in the apartment, bursting into tears, swallowing her tears, Miranda began to pack her things. But at that moment, Zach just appeared. He did not begin to justify himself, and as always, all the blame fell on the fragile shoulders of his wife. "Why did you make that humiliating scene in public? All men go to the left, and there is nothing superordinary about it. For you, maybe it's normal, but to me it's wild. Were you and her like animals? That's so disgusting." Zach put on a meek smile and headed toward his wife. Miranda screamed, "Don't you dare touch me." Zach squeamishly spit directly onto the floor. "Who needs you? Look at yourself in the mirror. You make a fool of yourself. I cheated on you because there's nothing of a woman in you, and I want a real woman around. Vanessa is real, and she's the one you took the sketches from me for. So there's nothing you can do." "You're wrong." "Yes, I can. Vanessa is talentless. She's incapable of creating anything interesting. But I can. That's a bold claim. Let's see if you can pull it off." "I don't care though. I've been meaning to divorce you for a long time myself. Vanessa is a more favorable party for me." Miranda did not listen to her husband's reasoning. She put the keys to the apartment on the nightstand in the hallway. "Don't forget to pay the landlady and the utilities at the same time." Zach rushed out. "Wait, that's not fair. You know I don't have any money to spare. Did you ask your mistress? She wouldn't say no to you." Zach expected anything from his wife, but not such determination. He stood in the hallway for a while, wondering if he should chase after his wife. But then he dismissed the thought and went to bed. Greg was not surprised to see his slim daughter. They had a fight. She rushed to her father and burst into tears on his chest. "Daddy, it's over. How can I trust people now? Calm down first, and then we'll talk. You will tell me everything that happened to you." They sat in the kitchen drinking tea until late at night. Miranda told in great detail about Zach's disgusting behavior, but Greg wasn't even surprised. It was to be expected. "I didn't like your imposter husband right away. He's a cheating bastard, and his mother called and told Zach and his father a lot about it. Forget about him, and the sooner you do it, the better for you." "No, Daddy, you can't forget that. I want revenge on both of them." The man's on edge. "What's on your mind?" "Put the bad one out of your mind. You shouldn't go to extremes because of two scoundrels." Miranda smiled through the force of the movie Papa Misunderstood Me. Revenge comes in many forms. I'm not going to do anything like that to them. I'll find another way, but I'll be sure to hurt him badly. I'm relying on your discretion. And even if you don't tell your mother all the details, she won't get over it. Dad, I have an idea. Let's go to her house together. No, daughter, I can't. I'm basically no better than you. Zach got lost without me too. So I forgot about everything in the world. I still can't forgive myself. Dad, but you loved Kelly. The man averted his eyes. I still love her. I often dream about her at night. Suddenly, something closed under the door. Miranda jumped up from her chair in fear. Dad, do you have mice in your apartment? The man laughed and opened the door to the kitchen. Wagging her tail cheerfully, the family favorite ran in. Here's my mouse, we were talking, and I forgot about it. The dog deftly jumped on the lap of the guest and began to express his feelings. Miranda tried to dodge the dog's kisses. I adore you too, but that's enough kissing. The doggie also deftly jumped to the floor and headed for her bowl. Greg poured her dry food. I thought of Mom later, wondering how she'd be alone. Vanessa is not used to taking care of others, and an animal with such a mistress is doomed to perish. That's why you came quietly one day and took him away. Daughter guessed it. That's right. That's exactly what happened. Greg shifted his gaze from his daughter to the dog, and his heart was no longer as empty as it had been before. He thought that mistakes were given to a man to correct them. Miranda had married rashly and had paid for her thoughtlessness. He too has some things to correct in his life. Any man wants to look into the future. But the mistake is that he expects to see a blooming garden or a sky full of stars. Miranda too thought that with the departure of Zach from her life, everything would turn 180 degrees. But the fiendish fate continued to strike. A few weeks after the final separation from her husband, Miranda realized that she was pregnant. She immediately considered it a tragedy and decided that this child should not be born. She took a week off work and went to her mother's house. Miranda did not know how she would bear Maria. Two unpleasant ones at once. The news probably would be less scolding again. But the mother met her daughter with tears and hugs. And I told you to chase that Zach away. My dad called me and told me about his activities. Come on, Mom, that's not the main problem. There's a bigger problem. Maria took a long look at his daughter's face and then shook his fist at her. Don't even think about it. The child has nothing to do with it. At least I'll have fun in my old age. I'm sitting here all alone. It's good that Adriana's visiting. You have no idea what a good doctor she is. Maria used to be so quick to jump from one topic to another. But at a moment when all the young woman's nerves were on edge, this sweet habit of her mother's had a calming effect. Miranda pressed herself against Maria. Mommy, it's nice to have you and Daddy around. The woman became serious. Tell me how much he's worried there. Very much. It's been almost a year and he can't get over the loss. Then he really loved that woman. Mom, he loved you too. He told me a lot about your youth. How you drowned your boat in the river and then pulled it out with a tractor. Tears came to Maria's eyes. When I talk to him, I feel that he wants to ask me something, but he's afraid. Daughter, do you think I should call him? Why is he grieving alone? Miranda decided to torture her mother a little. He's not alone and he has a girlfriend. A woman cursed in his heart. He can't help it if he can't bury his wife. Before he could bury his wife, he had a new batch. All men are in the same world. No faith. Miranda realized that her bad joke could end badly. Mom, calm down. I misspoke. Dad's girlfriend is a small dog named Mo. The breed is very cute and a smart creature. Maria looked at her daughter with judgment. Your jokes are not good. How can you do that? Is that how you mock your mother? Well, if the dog is obedient, let him come with her, and you go to Adriana. She'll be so happy. The young woman went to the clinic. I can imagine her friend's surprise when she sees her. But she didn't manage to get to the office where Adriana was waiting. Andrew caught up with her at the front desk. He clutched her arm just above the elbow and very loudly said, I've met my bride and she has come to her native land. So she left my son with a nose. You've made debts and you've been traveling around. Miranda wanted to free her hand. What are you talking about? Will you let me go? No, I'll tell you to your face before I let you go. Your whole family is rotten. And so are you. Zach told me how you've been messing around with other men's husbands. I couldn't stand it. And Miranda said it just as loudly. Yes, your Zach, the scoundrel and the scum of the earth, is trying to pull his dirty coat over me. Will you let me go now, or will I forbid it? Miranda pulled her arm out, but Andrew kept yelling, threatening to live with the entourage, the family, the sisters-in-law. An employee in a white coat walked by. Young lady, don't pay attention to this weirdo. They threw him out of the administration. He's walking around, he doesn't know who to take it out on. The fight with her husband's father had an unpleasant effect on the young woman's condition. She cried right outside the reception desk. She was immediately surrounded by people in white coats. Young lady, are you ill? Can I dig up some valerian or give you a sniff of our body? Thank you, I'm fine. It'll pass. A painfully familiar voice intervened in the turmoil. What's all this pandemonium? Please disperse. Miranda rushed over to her friend. Girlfriend, my dear, I wonder who's making a fuss. It's all over the hallway that I can't listen to the patient properly. I don't have time for chit-chat right now, but I'll drop by after the appointment. Miranda was seen off by the whole group. Even Adriana's mother decided to check in at the station. It would seem that everything has been said, and all that's left is to wave goodbye. But the premonition of a long separation increased the excitement. And the women gave Miranda a farewell, interrupting each other just before the train departed. Adriana clung to her friend. You're happier than me anyway. You're going to have a baby soon. Husband was gone though, lots of plans. I have nothing but work. Bored. I don't even have time to have a lover. Miranda laughed with pleasure. You're incorrigible, but I adore you anyway. This short trip home helped Miranda to regain her composure. She stayed with her father for a while, and Greg was truly happy that his loneliness was over. Everything was going well at the new job. Betty always consulted with the young treasurer. What detail to add to this or that outfit? Very soon they had regular customers. Their workshop took orders not only for sewing new clothes, but also for repairing old good things. Miranda gave Betty the idea. The owner was very pleased with her new employee. Girl, without you I would have been lost for sure. You give me such clever ideas. That's why I'd like to thank you in some way. Don't even think about it, Betty. It's the most rewarding thing I've ever done for you. No, baby, and you don't mind. I know about your hobby, and I want you to meet someone very knowledgeable. She's a woman who's an ace in the fashion world. She can help you get into the right orbit. Now my expert lives in Boston, but that's close by. The next weekend, Miranda hit the road again. The pregnancy was becoming more and more noticeable, and every day it became more and more difficult to cope with everyday tasks. So she was confused when she found herself in the middle of the station's hustle and bustle, cars and shuttles of various calibers whizzing by in different directions, and Miranda couldn't get to the other side of the street. When the traffic light finally turned green and she stepped onto the white-striped walkway, suddenly a silver foreign car turned out of somewhere. The young woman didn't have time to perch as she found herself on the hood of the car. She felt neither impact nor pain, but from fear for the future child almost lost consciousness. Witnesses began hysterically shouting, "Rather call an ambulance." The woman didn't move. The car door slammed and Miranda saw a familiar face above her, but the shock of the incident prevented her from thinking. Apparently she had been recognized too. "Miranda, how did you get here? And you fell right on top of my car. Get up." "I can't." "Is your stomach in the way?" "Oh my God, you're pregnant. You need to go to the hospital right away." And that's when Miranda remembered this young man. "Gary, I wondered where I'd seen you before." The memory was completely jammed with shock. The man helped the victim into a normal position. Miranda wanted to go straight to the address Betty had given her before she left, but Gary almost forced her into the back of his car. "You'll have time to see your fashion designer. Your health is more important right now. Imagine how I'd feel if something happened to you or your child. Believe me, no one will keep you in the hospital. They'll examine you and let you go home. Where do you live? Maybe your relatives should be informed?" "Gary, I told you I came to Boston on business. I live in Moscow with my father. Your husband is Zach. Why isn't he with you? How can you let your wife go alone in this situation? Miranda immediately felt uncomfortable, and she didn't want to tell a stranger about her family troubles. So she said briefly, "We're separated. I'm alone now." Gary blushed, apologizing for the indelicate question. "I just didn't know the latest developments." Miranda, she spent 2 hours going through the offices, but the doctors never found any abnormalities, as Gary took her to the hospital and accompanied her every step of the way. The medical professionals thought they were dealing with the victim's spouse. When all the test results came back, the doctor began to explain the situation to the man. There were no abnormalities. "Fortunately, we didn't find any abnormalities in your wife. But still, for insurance purposes, she should spend 2 or 3 days in the hospital." Gary smiled and winked at Miranda. "Doctor," he said, "if that's what you think the regime should be." True to her word, the lovely Miranda automatically nodded in agreement while she herself was thinking hard. What should she do next? The doctor on duty, pleased with this development, also winked at Gary. "I do not know whether they told you in the Moscow clinic or not, but you will have a boy. So, Daddy, you can buy everything that little school children like. Thank you, doctor, for the good news." Did the doctor seem to be in a good mood, or did he not want to part with the couple? But before leaving the emergency room, he said with a beaming smile so nice to meet happy couples, "I noticed a long time ago that if my first patient on my shift is smiling, it means I'm going to have a good day." Straightforwardly kind Dr. Gary escorted the doctor with a look and waited for Miranda to be sent to the ward. The young woman felt awkward. She wanted to make amends at least with words. "Gary, I'm sorry. It was my inattention. I got confused and didn't see your car. Now you've lost half a day because of me. That's all right. It's not a critical situation. Besides, I can afford to take some liberties. So don't worry about me. Think of yourself." When Miranda was brought to the ward by the nurse, the young man waved to her. "I'm not saying goodbye. I'll see you soon." In the evening after dinner, there was a knock on the ward. The women began to hurriedly tidy up because everyone hoped that the unknown visitor was eager to see her. Miranda did not even lift a finger because she was not expecting anyone. But the door opened and Gary entered the room with a huge bouquet of flowers. He went straight to the window where Miranda was sitting. "I came as promised. These flowers will put you in the mood. And here are some vitamins to keep you healthy." Gary put a full bag on the nightstand. "There's apples, bananas, even pineapple. I don't know your preferences, so I picked at random." Miranda didn't know where to escape the generous visitor and the prying eyes of her roommates. She whispered quietly to Gary, "Why so much? I can't eat it all. You keep it down and treat the girls." The attention-stolen women smiled. When Gary said goodbye and left, they pounced on Miranda with questions. "Such a handsome man. Where did you get him?" Miranda realized it was useless to explain to these women that they were just acquaintances. But she was pleased. Gary's participation in her fate and the open admiration of these women. So she blurted out the first thing that came to mind. "We met at a friend's wedding," to forestall further questioning. She turned her back to the audience as if she were going to sleep. On the 3rd day she was discharged, Gary greeted her again with flowers. He offered at once. "It's a bit awkward. Everyone thinks we're husband and wife. We'll buy her out. Why don't we use the first name? It would make it look more believable, and I'm fine with that. Although, to be honest, I don't like the idea of it." The young man looked at her strangely. "Why, a prank? By the way, my wife's seat is still vacant. I don't think I'm suitable for the position." Why did Miranda suddenly get angry? "Gary, you're asking stupid questions. You know exactly what you're asking. Let's stop this game because it's not funny anymore." "Actually, I wasn't joking. I was being serious." "Well, if you don't like it, I'll shut up. Just tell me where you want to ride first." Miranda expected to see a respectable lady or a middle-aged woman. But the door was opened by a girl about her age with a misunderstanding on her head in gold and wearing jeans. She didn't even have time to say hello. As the hostess asked, "Are you Miranda?" "Yes, hello." The girl wrinkled her nose. "Let's drop the unnecessary conventions. It's just a waste of time. And time is the most valuable resource these days. Come through. Don't fall down." I have both a residential apartment and a studio here. It's a cross between high-tech and modern. I don't really give a shit about anything. I'm used to living in a place where I can get out of the way at a moment's notice. Miranda didn't know the owner's name, but she hesitated to ask as they walked down the junk-filled hallway. Miranda noticed a booth with bouquets on the brochure's read, "Wendy, this is yours." The hostess turned around and waved her hand nonchalantly. "I was making these for a promotional event. There are a few copies left. Basically, it's part of my thesis. But now I'm working on my dissertation." Miranda was completely disoriented by the sloppy appearance. Wendy had not taken to her academic endeavors in any way. The girl noticed the state of the guest and laughed. "Are you shocked by my appearance? We're all so grubby around here. I like it when people look at me in the street. It's so cool. It's like an adrenaline rush. But we remember the folk wisdom that you shouldn't judge a person by their clothes. You're plugged in. I'll make tea in 5 minutes." Wendy disappeared behind the corner of the corridor and from there shouted tea or coffee. Wendy emerged with 2 big ears. "Here you go. No offense, but I'm used to simple cooking I don't have time for. Since there's a lot of work to do, I'm running to the variable room for lunch. It's right around here. You and I will sit for a while and then we'll go grab a bite to eat." Wendy took a couple of sips and stared at Miranda again. "What are we sitting around for? Let's show your sketches. Betty's been talking about your talents so much it's blowing my mind." Miranda carefully removed the folder. Wendy even whistled. "You're good. Each sketch is in a separate file. Let's see. This is it." The girl scrutinized the model's abdominal pair with handmade lace inserts. "Very impressive, but you can't put such a model on the stream. It's exclusive. There are simpler versions made of canceled linen with a rough finish." The more Wendy studied Miranda's work, the more serious her expression became. "Tell me honestly, what gave you the idea? It didn't come to you from the moon." Miranda was confused. She didn't know how to explain to this strange girl why she wanted to create this collection. Noticing the guest's confusion, the designer cheered her up. "You say it in your own words, I will understand. Don't be afraid and make yourself comfortable." Miranda told about the dynasty of tailors in their family and how from the age of 5 she helped her mother to sew on buttons and iron finished garments. Miranda knew how to determine the quality of the fabric and the specifics of Salt's work. Wendy listened to her carefully. "You can give lessons in craftsmanship yourself. Some of the subtleties I heard you about for the first time. I will try to help you. The work is really promising. Do you mind if I refer to your collection in my thesis?" Miranda didn't immediately realize what she wanted. It was the mysterious Wendy. She was silent, and she looked at her, waiting for an answer. "If you're worried about authorship, you don't have to worry. Your name will definitely be included. In fact, I think we should team up for a while. Of course, you have the final say." Miranda returned home in high spirits. Her first success had defined her, but she was afraid to make plans even for the near future. Gary volunteered to escort the girl home. "Since fate has already brought us together, let's keep in touch. You don't mind if I call you sometimes." Miranda smiled. "Call me, I'll be glad to talk to you. If I drop by to visit you." The girl laughed. "Gary, why the unnecessary questions? I'll be only glad to see you. I'll introduce you to my daddy and a cute dog named Mo. I'll catch you up. I'm going to NI next week, so you can start getting ready now." Outside the window was a dreary fall landscape, but Miranda's heart was raging with spring. She went over the events of the last few days minute by minute and felt happy. Betty looked at the radiant Miranda and smiled. "I take it the trip wasn't a waste." "No, not at all. Wendy is just an extraordinary person. She gives you ideas out of thin air, and what once seemed impossible becomes simple and accessible in her words. You know, she told me that I had a great future ahead of me, and I believed her. In fact, after talking to Wendy, and I believed in myself more than ever." Betty smiled. "I'm very happy for you. I'll have to look for Miranda's assistant again," the woman explained. "But no, you and I will never part." Her father was even happier about her success than she was. "Miranda forgot to tell you. I have a lot of Kelly's designs here, probably not just hers. Why don't you take a look sometime? I wanted to clean out my closet because we're about to have a new addition to our family. I'm just afraid to throw it away. Maybe you could go through it and see if there's anything you need. Then I'll continue. The next day was a day off, and Miranda sat down from the morning to go through the papers. Mostly they were old sketches that had already been sewn or scrapped with Kelly herself. That's when a familiar folder caught her eye. It couldn't be. She opened it up for sure. It was the drafts of the very collection that Vanessa, not without the help of her husband, had claimed as her own. But it was definitely them. Miranda thought for a moment, holding them in her hands, then folded them neatly and put them in her desk. In the evening, the doorbell rang. "Daddy, are you expecting someone?" "No, I don't think so." He picked up in his arms, bouncing some more, and went to open it. Miranda kept going through the papers. "Miranda, it's for you." She turned around and saw a confused father, and behind him a large bouquet of white roses. Not even seeing who was there behind the bouquet, she said, "Gary." He peeked out from behind the bouquet. "It's me," and then smiled. Miranda felt something warm in her chest, but she tried to drown it out. She was about to give birth to her ex-husband. Gary, he's just a good man. Which is weird, by the way. How did he get involved with Vanessa in the first place? Half an hour later, they were already sitting in the kitchen drinking tea and cake Gary had brought. Mole firmly settled on his lap. It was very strange because, for example, she didn't go near Zach at all. And if he was near her, she tried to grab him immediately and shamelessly. She tried to get at least one piece of cake from Gary. Greg smiled and threatened the dog with his finger. It wasn't even 20 minutes later. How'd he get ready? "Okay, you young people are sitting down. I completely forgot that I have to stop by Stepanovich's. He and I were going to go to see the rivers. I'm taking some of my stuff with me." After my father left, there was a pause. Miranda was the first to break the silence. "Gary, you want to ask why I'm here?" "I don't know why I'm here. It's nice to see you. It's nice to talk to you. I'm not leaving no matter how much you chase me away. In fact, I think you need a man's shoulder more than ever. By the way, how could your Zach do that? You're having a baby. He doesn't know." After Vanessa kicked my father out, took over the inheritance, my husband sent her away with strong feelings. Gary whistled. "Wow, that lunatic hasn't been put in the hospital yet." Miranda laughed out of the blue. "Should they? Of course they should. She's completely inadequate. Strange how she's going to run a business. And how does she do it with all the bodies and not very bright? How are they doing with Zach?" Miranda shrugged. "He took my collection, gave it to her. I guess that's how he earned her favor." Wait, isn't that what they showed about a year ago? She was a real triumph then. I remember someone saying no one expected this from talentless Vanessa. There were also rumors that it was her late mother's collection. Saying goodbye, Gary said to Miranda, "I want to take you to a restaurant tomorrow." Seeing that she wanted to object, he smiled. Pregnant women go to a restaurant too. Trust me, Miranda smiled. "Okay, let's go." Dad came back closer to nightfall, peeked into the kitchen. Gary was gone. Miranda gave him a stern look. "Dad, what was that?" "Miranda's daughter." "He was looking at you like that. I just gave you a chance to talk." Miranda sighed. "What can we talk about?" "Daddy, can't you see I'm going into labor in a month?" "I do, but that doesn't make you any less of an attractive woman." Miranda just shook her head. Had everyone gone crazy or what? Already in bed, she was going through her clothes when she had time. Miranda sewed herself something like this, but almost never wore it. She settled on a loose dress, something reminiscent of Indian costumes. Gary was already in the restaurant. He rushed toward her and froze before he reached her, just a little bit. "You are beyond charming and beautiful, and it makes me want to go back to Boston again, where you are considered by everyone to be my wife." Miranda was embarrassed. She didn't answer. He helped her sit down. At first, she felt stiff, and then Gary asked if Wendy had called her. And then Miranda got off on the wrong foot. Wendy called her often, and her plans were making Miranda dizzy, but she was really starting to believe that they could make it work. She brought Gary into their plans. He listened very carefully, then he said, "Listen, you tell such an interesting story that I myself wanted to plunge into this atmosphere. I could even be an investor in your first event, if you don't mind, of course." Miranda even gasped in surprise. How many people have failed to realize truly great projects just because they didn't have the means to do so? And it was very difficult to find an investor. And if you don't, I believe in you. I'm sure everything will work out. She didn't have time to answer anything, because next to them, someone exclaimed, "Gary." Miranda turned around. It was Vanessa and Zach. They both only now recognized Miranda and stood laughing with their mouths hanging open. "Miranda, what are you doing here?" Zach clearly didn't like it. Not that she was in a restaurant. Not that she looked so stunning. Not that Gary was next to her. Miranda found the strength and smiled. "I don't think I have to report to you." Zach glared angrily, and Vanessa threw her a glare. "God, what a gaudy dress." 100% from your sketches. Miranda smiled even brighter. "Yes, exactly from the collection that Zach took from me and brought to you like a faithful dog." Vanessa had become a princess. She turned away from Miranda and turned to Gary. "What are you doing here?" "You left, as you can see you're back." Gary took Miranda's hand affectionately. "Miranda and I are going to tear up the fashion world." Vanessa was red in the face, and after Gary's words, she turned pop. She turned sharply to Zach, who stood like a statue. "Where's our table?" Zach went forward, and Vanessa looked at Miranda once more. "Don't even think about it." Gary did. "Vanessa, I think your husband is waiting for you." The mood was ruined. Gary was silent and looked at her thoughtfully. "Say, Miranda, I understand that Zach doesn't know about the pregnancy. And since you're sitting so perfectly, he hasn't noticed anything." She shrugged her shoulders. "Well, I didn't inform him, but I didn't try to hide anything on purpose." He smiled. "That's good. Now let's get something to eat already. I'm going to be hungry soon." In fact, if it hadn't been for the evil stares that Vanessa and Zach and the other end of the room were giving them, it would have been a wonderful evening. She went over the events of the last few days minute by minute and felt happy. Betty looked at the radiant Miranda and smiled. "I take it the trip wasn't a waste." "No, not at all. Wendy is just an extraordinary person. She gives you ideas out of thin air, and what once seemed impossible becomes simple and accessible in her words. You know, she told me that I had a great future ahead of me, and I believed her. In fact, after talking to Wendy, and I believed in myself more than ever." Betty smiled. "I'm very happy for you." "I'll have to look for Miranda's assistant again," the woman explained. "But no, you and I will never part." Her father was even happier about her success than she was. "Miranda forgot to tell you. I have a lot of Kelly's designs here, probably not just hers. Why don't you take a look sometime? I wanted to clean out my closet because we're about to have a new addition to our family. I'm just afraid to throw it away. Maybe you could go through it and see if there's anything you need. Then I'll continue." The next day was a day off, and Miranda sat down from the morning to go through the papers. Mostly they were old sketches that had already been sewn or scrapped with Kelly herself. That's when a familiar folder caught her eye. It couldn't be. She opened it up for sure. It was the drafts of the very collection that Vanessa, not without the help of her husband, had claimed as her own. But it was definitely them. Miranda thought for a moment, holding them in her hands, then folded them neatly and put them in her desk. In the evening, the doorbell rang. "Daddy, are you expecting someone?" "No, I don't think so." He picked up in his arms, bouncing some more, and went to open it. Miranda kept going through the papers. "Miranda, it's for you." She turned around and saw a confused father, and behind him a large bouquet of white roses. Not even seeing who was there behind the bouquet, she said, "Gary." He peeked out from behind the bouquet. "It's me," and then smiled. Miranda felt something warm in her chest, but she tried to drown it out. She was about to give birth to her ex-husband. Gary, he's just a good man. Which is weird, by the way. How did he get involved with Vanessa in the first place? Half an hour later, they were already sitting in the kitchen drinking tea and cake Gary had brought. Mole firmly settled on his lap. It was very strange because, for example, she didn't go near Zach at all. And if he was near her, she tried to grab him immediately and shamelessly. She tried to get at least one piece of cake from Gary. Greg smiled and threatened the dog with his finger. It wasn't even 20 minutes later. How to get ready. Okay, you young people are sitting down. I completely forgot that I have to stop by Stepanovich's. He and I were going to go to see the rivers. I'm taking some of my stuff with me. After my father left, there was a pause. Miranda was the first to break the silence. Gary, do you want to ask why I'm here? I don't know why I'm here. It's nice to see you. It's nice to talk to you. I'm not leaving no matter how much you chase me away. In fact, I think you need a man's shoulder more than ever. By the way, how could your Zach do that? You're having a baby. He doesn't know. After Vanessa kicked my father out, took over the inheritance, my husband sent her away with strong feelings. Gary whistled. Wow, that lunatic hasn't been put in the hospital yet. Miranda laughed out of the blue. Should they? Of course they should. She's completely inadequate. Strange how she's going to run a business. And how does she do it with all the bodies and not very bright? How are they doing with Zach? Miranda shrugged. He took my collection, gave it to her. I guess that's how he earned her favor. Wait, isn't that what they showed about a year ago? She was a real triumph then. Gary left 2 days later, taking Wendy's coordinates, and Miranda began her sketches for Betty with renewed vigor. She helped as much as she could. Together, they found a young girl who now helped the woman sew. The atelier was gradually gaining customers, and Betty said with a sort of shudder that she would have to expand. Betty, that's wonderful. Oh, come on, baby. I can't believe my little atelier is going to be so big. I won't be able to do it. Betty, I'll be helping you. Gary's gone. Miranda was setting up the baby's place. Daddy helped her with everything. One night, Miranda came into his kitchen. Dad was calling an ambulance. Greg dropped his plate and grabbed the phone. He was so nervous, Miranda felt sorry for him. Dad, you call Mom later. Okay, honey, I will. By morning, there was a loud voice, and the little boy Miranda looked at his face with a smile. God, how could she have thought to get rid of this miracle? Maria woke up to the phone on the nightstand going off. Oh my God, Miranda. She grabbed the receiver. Yes, hello, Maria. The woman squeezed the receiver so that her knuckles and knuckles ached. Hello, Greg. Maria, we are with you. The voice of the ex-husband interrupted, but he pulled himself together. You and I became grandparents. Miranda gave birth to a boy. I just found out. Like my girl, the boy is a grandchild. Maria, I wanted to ask you. You should come and show your daughter around if you don't want to stay, so you'll leave. The pause lasted only a few seconds. I'll come, Greg. I'll come today. On the eve of her discharge, she got a call from Wendy. All Miranda, the world has gone crazy over your sketches. The coolest monsters in town are ready to take them on. But your friend Gary called me and suggested something else. You know, I'm sure we'll get it done and you'll be heard from soon enough. Wendy slowed down a bit. I am in the birthing center right now learning how to be a mom of a beautiful baby boy. Congratulations. Why didn't you tell anyone? But I didn't expect it to happen so fast. Miranda knew there would be a lot of people there to greet her. Adriana's mom, who'd been living with her dad in his apartment for a few days, her dad himself. But when she saw Gary, her heart treacherously shook. The nurse who took out her hand said loudly, "Who wants the treasure?" And then Gary stepped forward, accepted the blue bundle, and looked inside. Wow, what a small one. Everyone laughed. It had been 5 years. Miranda, these are the papers you asked for. Thank you, Anna. The gift arrived. It's on my desk. Shall I put it in the cars? No, that won't be necessary. My husband will come and get it. Anna's out. Miranda delved into the paperwork. Yes, it was exactly as she thought. Bride had made a lot of wrong moves lately. And given that Vanessa didn't have any good fashion designers, no one really wanted to mess with her. The mighty empire Kelly had created was slowly but surely operating at a loss, falling into decline. Miranda already knew that Vanessa had kicked Zach out after just a year of living together as unfit. But that was understandable. Zach wouldn't break up much, but he's not stupid enough to get a better life. The woman threw herself on the back of the chair. Now the star had a lot of debts, and their number was growing. Miranda realized that if Vanessa does not do anything urgently, the firm will simply be sold with a hammer. And also the firm had once prospered. And Miranda knew very well what kind of equipment it had, what kind of craftsman it had at least had. There was a knock on the door. Then it opened and Gary walked in. "Miranda laughed every time you knock on my door. I want to throw something heavy at you. Miranda, the vicious woman doesn't eat much." He looked at the papers Miranda had left lying on the table. "I take it the final stage has come to a close." Miranda sighed. "Gary, you're going to laugh, but I can't. I have so many fond memories that are specifically associated with the bride. I've worked there. I've been to shows there. It's Kelly's baby. I guess I'm gonna back out of my plans. Let her live. But I don't think Vanessa's smart enough to pull the firm out. You know what, I have an idea. Let's buy a place, and you could have a branch in another city. Especially since there are no equivalent firms there." Miranda stared at her husband to buy. "Who will sell it to us?" Well, Vanessa, of course, is stupid, but not so stupid that she doesn't realize that she is finished and can be left without everything, and even with debts. You're right about us. We need someone else to negotiate. Miranda looked at her husband and was silent. Gary put his arm around her. "Are you afraid of something? Did she smile when you were around?" "No, let's go home. Everyone's probably gathered there by now. And your mom, my mom's still out there. I heard her here the other day telling someone off for a crooked stitch. That's what I think. You get ready and I'll go find her." Miranda smiled. The relationship between Gary and her parents had developed immediately. Maria had always been on her son-in-law's side. Miranda and Gary didn't fight at all. But the woman knew for sure that if there was a dispute, her mother would take her son-in-law's side. For this reason, when she was around, Miranda never said anything against her husband, let alone arguments. Today, the loudest 5 years would gather all the closest people, all those who had been with Miranda loud and close for 5 years. Voices were heard in the hallway. The door opened and Gary proclaimed loudly, "So what do you think? I managed to find not only Maria, but Betty as well. We think we have them all there." They run around production giving out instructions. Betty smiled embarrassedly. "I'm forgetting to look at the time. There's only one Greg. He can't even set the table." Miranda laughed. Dad and Mom were on their honeymoon for the 5th year. They lived separately in the apartment where Dad used to live. And Miranda and Gary had bought themselves a big house. They had to live in 2 cities. That's why Rob often visited one parent or the other. Despite all the status, Gary's parents became friends with Miranda's parents. Although Miranda immediately told them honestly that this child is not Gary, they went outside and braved in the evening air. Miranda said good only to Gary, who was struggling to hold the huge car that was supposed to roll by itself. "You muttered, 'Enjoy yourself for now.' And with your permission, I threw the present in the car." Miranda laughed at Gary. "You're the one who says men shouldn't whine." Everyone laughed. Gary, who was trying to remain serious, soon couldn't take it anymore. It was fun at home. Rob had his hair nicely combed with a bowtie and in a white shirt, and he was sitting on the big rug with the presents. He generally tried to behave very decently, so that his mother would not say later that he was a hurricane, typhoons and all that combined. He didn't last long, though. When he heard that his parents had returned, he quickly ran into the hallway. In the middle of the party, the doorbell rang. The housekeeper entered the room there. The other man said that he had come to his son's birthday party. There was silence at the table. Miranda stood up with her. Gary stood up. He smiled. "What's the matter with you? We'll be back soon." Zach was standing in the hallway. Miranda hadn't seen him in 5 years, and you could tell it had been at least 15. "What do you want here?" Zach turned to her. "Well, first of all, hello. Secondly, you have to speak to me in a completely different tone of voice, because I am, after all, the father of your child, whom you kept from me, so I can get on your nerves pretty good." Miranda looked at him calmly. Well, thirdly, Zach was slightly confused. He wasn't used to seeing Miranda so confident. Third, a father shouldn't have a worse life than his child. And I think I should get to know my son, well, or get some moral compensation for you depriving me of communication with him. Zach's only been back in town for 3 days. Tried to find happiness in one place or another. It's a good thing nothing kept him in one place. But somehow he had no luck. like he was jinxed. "Who's back?" Called Vanessa, asked to meet, and surprisingly she agreed. Even invited him to her house. Zach guessed that no one else had fallen for her and took a breath. The question of accommodation and food was solved already at night, drinking wine. Vanessa asked, "Well, do you communicate with your son?" He even choked. "What son?" Vanessa gave him a strange look. "Are you being a jerk or are you being serious?" "The son that my aunt had. And I know she has a son. But that has nothing to do with me. The baby has a daddy." Vanessa sighed. "Put the glass down. How can you be so stupid?" Zach wanted to take offense, but he asked why you thought you were my son. "Do the math if you don't get it that way." He did the math and almost fainted. Wow, Zach had always been against children, but now a shared child might serve him well. Vanessa smiled. "I see your brain is finally working. I guess it's time for you to lay claim to it." Zach squinted his eyes. "Listen, Vanessa, you can answer me one question. Why do you hate turnips? I mean, she's never done anything bad to you." Did Vanessa's eyes sparkle? "She took away everything I should have. She even has Gary, and he's hers." Zach, of course, was miffed that he was lying next to him, reminiscing about Gary, but he decided not to dwell on those words. He realized that if you wanted to be a friend to everything, you had to be against Miranda, and then you'd be in the clear. Miranda smiled wickedly. Zach got out. He was so shocked that he even stumbled. "Miranda, you'll be sorry, and I'll make such a fuss. People will laugh." Gary took him by the collar. "Actually, I should punch you in the face, but that wouldn't solve anything. Stay here." He went out. Then he came back with some papers. Zach read the paternity test and realized his last hope for a good life was gone. It said in black and white that Rob is Gary's son. Fuck you. Zach turned around and rushed out of the house. But now he's going to make Vanessa hang herself, and she wasn't worried about him. She just wanted to spoil her aunt's life. Miranda carefully lifted the paper. She read it and looked at Gary in surprise. "What is it? Where did it come from?" He waved his hand in embarrassment. "Why? Let it be." Few such questions can arise so many times in life. But how? "Miranda, come on, you're making a great living now. Have you forgotten that you can do a lot of things for money?" She shook her head. "I won't argue with you this time. Let it be so." Gary took a breath. He knew his wife's desire for justice and tried not to tell her too much so that she wouldn't worry. In particular, why had Vanessa's firm gone under so quickly? Fair enough, a simple takeover. But Miranda would obviously see it differently. Well, that's okay. Now his lawyers and Vanessa's lawyers are preparing the papers for signature. Tomorrow Miranda would only need to sign. He enjoyed imagining the look in Vanessa's eyes. Nothing to appropriate other people's designs on other people's husbands. No husbands. And even if it was a good thing she'd stolen Zach. Gary had somehow gotten caught up in his thoughts and didn't immediately hear his dad tugging on his arm. He flinched. "I did." "Yes, son. Mommy says we're going to have a baby sister soon, and you don't listen." Gary smiled. "What an imagination you have, Rob." It was suspiciously quiet at the table. He looked at the people present and didn't understand why you were all looking at me like that. And then it began to dawn on him. "Wait, is this for real?" Miranda nodded. Gary stood up, then sat down, then stood up again, and suddenly grabbed Miranda in a twirl, taking her hands. This was fun he liked. And he threw himself at his parents too, who squealed. Immediately Greg and Adriana joined them, and then everyone at the table. "How do I look?" Gary, as stunning as ever. "But I'm serious." And me as they sat in the notary's office outside the door with papers waiting for them to sign. And Vanessa, who had no idea, also dared to buy her crumbling firm. Whoever this man was, the important thing was that he was there. Of course, Vanessa had not expected things to work out this way. She was sure that the firm under her leadership would always prosper. She thought her mother was far worse at running the firm than she was at getting involved with it. Zach. Vanessa needed him like air right now. At least someone around. She was all alone. I didn't want him to see how much money she was going to get. All right, she couldn't figure out what kind of oligarch the buyer was. She seemed to know everyone, even owed almost everyone. But they certainly wouldn't buy the bride. Then who would? The door opened. Vanessa stood up abruptly. "It's you? You're buying my firm." Miranda smiled. "Face it, Vanessa. It was never entirely yours. And you know that, don't you? If you mean your father and his too, you're not only a bad fashion designer, you're also a bad businessman." Miranda sat down at the table and began to sign the papers that Vanessa had signed a moment before, then clenched her fists in impotent rage. "Do you think I've lost?" Miranda interrupted her. "No, you didn't lose. You just ended up in the position you were supposed to be in. You've got a mansion, lots of money now. Open something else, like a stray dog shelter. I assure you, you'll have a lot of sins written off in the next world." Gary tried not to smile. How he loved his wife, especially like this. When everything was signed, the notary handed Vanessa a check. "Here is the money ready. You can withdraw it at any time." Vanessa snatched the slip of paper from his hands and rushed for the exit. Zach followed her. "Wow, that's a lot of money. We must persuade Vanessa to go to the sea, to unwind, to relax. We could go for a nice walk." He was a little late because Miranda left the office alone. Gary was late. He had some conversation with the notary. Zach immediately turned to her. "Miranda, how gorgeous are you?" She looked surprised and arched an eyebrow. "Why all of a sudden?" "I remember you always said that I was so bad, that I was disgusting to look at. Miranda, you don't have to be upset with me. You know I was hot when I was young. If you only knew how much I missed you. Miranda, do you remember how good we were together?" "Maybe," he said, and was moving closer to Miranda. She was backing away from him. Zach was exulting. He would be able to put a spin on her, reached up to kiss her. But Miranda slapped him so hard that his eyes blurred. She was a fool, and she still is. He just missed her by a little bit. Just in time to see Gary's fist flying at his nose. Zach collapsed with his heel on the floor and howled. And Gary said, satisfied, "How long had I wanted to do this? If it hadn't been for Miranda's promise." Gary was rotting her. "It's all right, yes. But then let's go look at a new firm." 40 on my tail told me the employees had already set up a meeting. Almost shared the red carpet. Miranda looked at her husband suspiciously. "Tell me, how do you know all this?" Gary blinked innocently. "I'm telling you, 40 on my tail." Miranda pressed herself against him. "Oh, I think there's too many 40s around you. You know everything, you just predict everything. It is and it will be. I'm supposed to protect you from everything."